I was thinking maybe this week we could like do a podcast or something. Does that sound like a good idea to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to check my schedule.
All right, we'll think about it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Big Conversations Podcast. And, we're just going to go ahead and dive right on into it this week. What prompted the topic, and we're talking about mobile phones, iPhones, smartphones, whatever. And I'm going to say iPhones, and you guys will understand why toward the end of the show. But we're going to talk about how phones have changed our lives. Now, what prompted this topic? So recently I had a conversation with a friend. I was at work and he just came to say hi, and he was talking about a girl who he had met her like at the gym or whatever,
Okay.
and then they ended up, spending some time together.
Yeah.
And there were some awkward moments that they had in their conversation. I wasn't there. It's just a story he relayed
Right.
to me. But then afterward, it seemed hard for him to like be able to interact with her in person. But she would text him all the time, and she would send him messages, and I was like, that's...
But the in-person conversation was awkward?
Yeah. So I wasn't there, but we've been in those types of situations
yeah,
before.
definitely.
Just got to be honest here, And another thing that prompted the topic in my mind is that my mom recently was about to take a road trip, from Orlando back up to Tennessee, and she had broken her phone, and she was waiting to get a new one in the mail. And fortunately, she decided to not go, but I was thinking in my mind, like, I don't want my mom traveling that far without a phone.
Exactly.
Because maybe at one point in the past, like if you
Right.
stopped on the side of the road because you had a flat tire, you could wave people down. And the
That's
person
just
who's...
Not safe anymore.
It's not.
No,
the
that's
person
terrifying.
who stopped is a predator.
Yeah.
It's just what... And maybe I'm a little bit negative on that, but you understand
Well,
what I'm
no,
trying
like
to say.
being a woman traveling alone, like you definitely have to think about those things. Like, and if
Yeah.
I didn't have a phone, I don't think I could.
Yeah, it's terrible. Anyway, another thing that kind of prompted the topic is I've always felt, for me personally, and I try not to toot my own horn too much, but I think
Sure.
I've always been much better interacting with people face to face than over text messages, especially if that happened to be, a girl I was trying to
Right.
hit up. I do so much better in person.
Yeah.
And as soon as I start typing, I just...
Which is not the case for a lot of people. So, honestly,
Is it usually the opposite
not
for
to
most
toot your
people?
horn, but yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, for a lot of people, and like, I feel like any guy that has ever approached me, well, okay, not any guy.
Okay.
Most guys,
Let me pause you right there. Are you thinking of anyone in particular when you say that? Continue.
okay, most guys that have approached me ever, it's been DMs or text or Snapchat or like the most awkward form of communication. Like, I would much prefer, and I much respect him much more if he like just walks up to me and is like, hey, I think you're pretty, would you like to go out sometime? Or like, hey, can you help me with this homework? Yeah. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
We'll get into that more. Anyway, word of the day. Here at Big Conversations Podcast, the goal is mainly to inspire conversations and get people talking, but there has to be some sort of an entertainment element. So with the word of the day, we're not necessarily looking to find words that will get you an A on your paper.
So essentially, don't use these words.
Yeah, use them with your friends. That's
Yeah.
it. Word of the day is discoordinated. I'm sure we'll put that on the screen. Discoordinated is an adjective, and it means injured. So let's just say you're playing basketball, you're getting the hoops on with your friends, you try to hit some nice crossover, you jump up, you think the shot's going to go in, you land on the side of your foot, kind of twist your ankle. You're feeling a little discoordinated at that point.
Discoordinated. Interesting. So it's not uncoordinated. So it's not like
No.
wobbly and like
Yeah.
no balance. It's
So-
injured.
Yeah, Peyton, let me
Okay.
pitch this to you.
Okay.
Let's do a little practice.
All right, I'm ready.
Use discoordinated in a sentence for our listeners.
For guys that try to slide into a girl's DMs in order to get a date, their hearts might become a little discoordinated.
Ooh, I already like that. Today's going to be a great show. So, why is this important? Frankly, and we're not going to get too deep into the political side, but everybody has a cell phone at this point, and I promise you are just a dollar sign to big tech.
Yeah.
No less, nothing more. The second reason why this is important is because phones have already fundamentally changed the way we interact. And Peyton, we haven't even gotten to the point of saturation with virtual reality.
That's absolutely terrifying. Metaverse, there's so many things that are like up and
Yeah.
coming that are going to just transfer us over into electronics and media more. And so the place where we're at already is kind of scary, and looking forward to the future, that honestly terrifies me.
No less. Peyton, one of the things that I think we're both realizing, and a lot of people are, is that social media it's become a net negative in society, right?
Yeah,
and
agreed.
I'm not a fan of constantly just deciding, oh, I'm not going to do social media anymore and coming back. There's no need to flip-flop. But overall, the effect that social media is having on the world is more bad than good.
I agree.
What would you say to that?
I think definitely as people started joining and as the creators even put the apps out there, I think it was a way, Ben, definitely to like get people better connected, to start groups, to be able to keep the world, you know, connected.
So, you know, one of the things that I think social media has done, which you alluded to, earlier in our conversation, is that it's such an easy cop-out for face-to-face interaction.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And one of the things that I find crazy is that if we were just talking in person, let's say we were hanging out, there's no cameras, there's no microphones, we're just hanging out, being friends, right? At some point, we would determine, okay, this is a good time to go to bed, go back to work, do whatever we need to do.
Sure.
But we find a way to just keep scrolling and keep scrolling and keep scrolling on social media. And not only do we end up wasting time, the time that we could have spent actually interacting with more channels of communication, we're just scrolling.
I agree. And I think that comes back to not only are phones a cop-out, which, okay, so I think there's two different ways that people can cop out using phones. One, well, okay, honestly, I'm guilty of both. But for one, I think sometimes when there's a lull in conversation, or if you don't have maybe the mental energy to input into a conversation anymore, it's you pick up a phone so you can kind of tap out of your surroundings.
Yeah. Let me interrupt you right there.
Okay.
Have you ever had a time where you went somewhere and either your phone was dead, or better yet, you just didn't have it in your pocket, and you reached a quiet moment? It's
peaceful.
Instantly, it's peaceful at first.
Yeah.
And maybe you're better than me. I find after a few minutes, I start tapping my pocket, looking for my phone, almost like I need a hit from my vape pen or something.
That's
and
what
I
it
don't
is.
vape. Kids, don't do it.
Don't vape. Literally, I was going to bring that up. So I was going to talk about two different ways that we cop out using phones and how phones are actually an addiction. Like the blue light that it gives us, the what's the word for it? Instant gratification. Instant gratification will bring forth, you know, it's that quick release, that quick burst of energy that you get from looking at your phone. And oftentimes you'll either get a like or a comment or something. And if you're not getting those, you usually will go to post something else in order to get those. Addiction,
I love
phone addiction.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It happens. Going back to the cop-out thing, though, because I really wanted to touch on that. Have you ever been walking, Ben, and maybe it's a friend, maybe it's an acquaintance, maybe you don't even know them, but rather than, you know, just walking past, maybe giving a smile or a wave or hey, they pull out their phone and pretend to text so that they don't have to look at you? Or do you ever do that?
I don't do it.
You don't do it?
Never.
Okay,
But I know
right.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, see, and I've done that. I've been walking past people on the promenade, and I'll you know, where it's kind of awkward, where you're like, at what point do I make eye contact and smile? Maybe I just overthink things. But sometimes when you get to that point, they'll pull out their phone so that they don't have to interact. And I'm like, interesting. Yeah, I want to talk about that on a podcast someday. But
Yeah. Almost like we're having a big conversation
I
or something.
mean, you know.
It's interesting you bring up the pulling out phones, walking past people, because I 100% have seen people do that. I know what you're talking about. Something that I just decided in my own mind is that I don't want to do that, so I'm really intentional about trying to make eye contact and, you know, do the little nod. And it's kind of, when it's somebody you know, then it's kind of like, when it's somebody you don't know, it's right.
Yep.
Like, we go down. I guess we respect people we don't know more. Isn't that weird?
I don't know. But that is weird. I never really
Yeah.
Okay.
But we've all done it, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I have noticed for sure is that when I'm trying to keep my eyes up and make eye contact with other people, I get, I'm making up a number here, but it's less than 50%. I'll say 30% of people who will even look up. You know, and some people, like, they see me smiling or see me making eye contact, and I can tell that's foreign to them. It's like we're not supposed to look at each other anymore.
Exactly. It's weird.
That's what phones
really
have done
weird
to us.
And I've noticed, too, kind of the generation that is younger than us, not to pick on them necessarily, but I think we were kind of more the experimental generation where when we were born, you know, our parents were still transitioning from the camcorders and the video cameras and the digital cameras and flip phones to then this like iPhone, iPad combination where the technology was still coming out. So our generation, I think, had a very good foundation of social interaction, whereas the generation up and coming directly behind us, I have noticed that there is a lot of social inept within them, and they're just
chance.
Awkward. They grew up as iPad kids.
Yeah.
They don't know how to have a conversation. They can't look somebody in an eye, and I think it definitely has to do with parenting and just that, again, that addiction and that reliance on social media and technology. Yeah.
And one thing I want to get your feedback on too is people talk all the time about how social media, especially for girls, misrepresents reality of like how people are supposed to look or
Yeah.
whatever. And to some degree, I understand. I think everybody does. But first, do you think this issue more acutely affects females? And if so, talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay. I think yes, it definitely does affect females more often, and it's more common that a female will be affected. Not to say that it doesn't affect males, but it affects males in a different way where they see bodybuilders, muscle people, where it like inspires them to get into the gym and to start working out. Females, it's more of a not so natural body image that we get presented where, so like with just a couple taps of your finger on your phone or an iPad, you can slim up your waist, you can, make your breasts bigger, you can make your butt bigger. And what a lot of girls don't realize is that those images that are being presented, we think it's reality. So we go, oh man, that girl looks like that, I need to look like that. So we have this unrealistic body standard presented on social media. So a lot of people don't even recognize that that's not real. And so then it becomes the ideal that gets set before us. And I have been guilty. I've fallen, prey to that. And it just takes a lot of understanding that posing is one big thing that can happen where you can pose a certain way and stick out a hip and it makes you look totally different than in real life. And I think I might get roasted on this.
Posing is such a big thing. And it's something that, I'll be honest, I didn't realize. And I realize more every day, to be honest. But just as an example, you talked about how guys see images of very muscular bodybuilders, and it's like, I want to look like that when I grow up, right? I remember seeing pictures of bodybuilders who will have like 8 visible abs. And I was like, okay, I want to look like that. I'm going to get there. And I legitimately thought until probably like 19 years old that I could get big enough naturally where I would look that way without flexing and being warmed up in good lighting and all that. And it was a harsh wake-up call to me to realize that no, I'm very close to as good as I'll ever get right now. I shouldn't say very close, but I'm never going to get there. That's not real life. Those people don't look that way when they wake up. But and I'm a guy. So I guess technically just knowing the women are less visual than men are, I probably feel less pressure to adhere to that standard. However, even for me, it was still really disappointing and really surprising for me to not know that. And that's, we have a problem.
We do. We do have a problem. And might get some flack for this, but I think girls tend to be more insecure when looking outward, and guys tend to be more insecure when looking inward. Does that make sense?
Guys are more likely to not base what they want to look like on their friends, but on what they assume they should look like just in the mirror, more arbitrarily.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Another thing that's interesting, and kind of taking the misrepresentation of reality in a different direction, I'm a big sports fan. Colin Cowherd is one of my favorite sportscasters, whatever you call them on the internet. I remember there was one clip where he was talking about LeBron James, who had like made some tweet or whatever, and basically he made a fool of himself. I don't recall specifically the tweet, but what I do recall very vividly is at one point he said, this sounds like some NBA guy who was just having too much time in his hotel and he was scrolling on Twitter, and he just turns to the camera and he's like, stay off social media. It doesn't represent the public. And I thought about that and I was like, that really is true. What social media can be is it's an echo chamber, right? The strongest things people say are the things that get reshared and recirculated the most. And then people quickly get to believing that these fringe conspiracy theory beliefs are the mainstream and are normal, and that they know a lot of people that way. And as a matter of fact, like, obviously, what I'm saying is going to invoke images of politics in people's minds. And I had a friend, and I hate to say I had a friend, but it's the truth. This was before the 2016 election, I believe. She shared something on her Instagram story that basically said, it sucks knowing that 50% of the country is probably racist. And I replied to the story and I asked her, I was like, so are you saying that you think every single person that will vote for Donald Trump is racist? And she said yes. And that's so sad.
That is.
Because again, that's where we've gotten because of this echo chamber misrepresentation of reality that is social media.
That is true.
Anyway, moving on. Dating is going down.
It is going
Social
down.
media is doing that to us. What do you got?
Man, Ben, where do I start? Let's just say that. We kind of touched earlier about how with the upbringing of social media, people tend to revert to that first for not only asking people out on a date, but getting to know people through social media apps, even dating apps like Hinge. What are the other ones? Bumblebee? Maybe it's just
Yeah.
Bumble.
Tinder,
obviously, yeah.
And
So,
you know what?
yeah.
Actually, the number one dating app statistically is Instagram. That's not surprising, though, is
Exactly.
it?
Yeah, no, it's really not.
Yeah. Continue, though.
But through Instagram, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that Instagram tends to be a highlight reel. So it's not like you're posting your fresh face when you wake up in the morning. It's not like you're posting, the usual day-to-day life. It's the highlights. It's what you want people to see. It's what you want to represent yourself as. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But when you're getting to know somebody on a first name basis where it's initial interactions, those are going to be much better represented in person because that is truer to who you are as a person, not social media. And I think that a lot of people can also hide behind social media in the sense of they don't have to actually risk getting as hard rejections. So it's like I can hide behind a phone screen and say, hey, are you busy tomorrow night? You want to go grab ice cream? And if they say no, I can write it off as, oh, okay, yeah, sweet. No, actually something came up. But doing that in person, that's going to take a lot more guts. And if you say no, that's going to hurt my feelings a lot worse. And so I think it's, again, a cop-out. Dating is a cop-out through Instagram, through social media, through anything.
You touched on something that we have to zero in on a little bit more.
I'm ready.
One of just the realities of life is that you're going to get rejected sometimes. You're going to get turned down sometimes.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you a bad person. That's just the nature of the game. The best looking people in the world still get rejected, right? Now, and different people are going to have different opinions on this, but I think most people, even if they don't consider themselves traditional, will say it's appropriate for guys to step up, make the first move, approach girls, right? And I'm not a girl, but if I was a girl today in 2022, I feel like I would be really, really frustrated and disappointed. Most guys are not brave enough to go up to a girl they don't
it's
know in a
true.
public place and express interest in her. And that shouldn't be such a hard thing.
Yeah.
It should not be a shot to the heart.
It
If
should
I
be.
ask you for your number, you say no.
And just because, if it was you and me, just because I say no, that doesn't mean that I don't find you attractive. That doesn't mean that there could be an array of things. So I think guys a lot of times have to realize not to take it personally because half the time it isn't even personal. It's maybe they're not ready. Maybe they already have a boyfriend. Maybe they're moving. Like there's a range of reasons as to why a girl may say no. But I was actually just talking to my mom, I think like last week about this, but because she was like, Peyton, like, you should, be going on lots of dates. Like, just get to know people. This is, you're in your 20s. This is a great time to do that. And I was like, Mom, I've never been asked out on a date. I've never been asked on a date.
Let me pause you there.
Okay.
You've never had a guy approach you and directly ask you to go on a date?
The only time it's happened is once they had considered us talking.
Okay, hold on a minute. I need to talk to the audience for a second. If you're listening to Big Conversations and you're a guy, this has to stop. Okay? We cannot be so scared of women that we will not go up to them and ask them on a date. Go do it. Go do it. Just, what are you waiting for? Why is your life better for avoiding the challenge? Just go do it.
Guys, I can promise you, if you like a girl and if you haven't already made a move, walk up to her in person and ask her on an official date. Make sure she knows it's a date. That proves communication. That proves you have social skills. And that tells the girl that you're ready to move forward with the relationship. This whole talking stage, this whole what are we, this whole texting the group chat saying, bro, I saw her in person. Do I talk to her? Do I not talk to her? I don't know. I'm tired of it. Everybody else should be tired of it. We need to get to a point in our lives where face-to-face communication is priority.
Wow. Peyton, I find that insane. Because then this is kind of a strong thing to say, but just I'm going to go there.
Okay.
If you weighed 250 pounds, or if you had been dropped as a child, or you had burn marks all over your face, that would be understandable, but you're not a bad-looking person. The fact that no one has ever come up to you face-to-face and asked you on a date, like, I'm embarrassed for the guys that I live with.
I'm embarrassed
That's
for
horrible.
myself.
And, another thing that I find objectionable, something that I think has become a much bigger problem with dating now that we have all the social media apps is now we have the illusion of options. A lot of you think that any pretty girl that you see come up on your feed or any guy who makes cool TikToks that goes to your school is an option. They're not. Don't get it twisted.
That's true. That is true.
I don't know if that's the scientific term that is usually used when people are talking about this, but there are so many factors that go into whether someone would potentially even go on a date with you. Forget being in a relationship, right? All you can really see when you're scrolling through profiles on social media is, do they have an attractive face?
Yeah.
And do they know how to write a reasonably witty bio?
Yeah.
Are they called bios on all apps anyways on Instagram?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah. There's so many other factors, right? But so many people spend so much of their time just sitting at home scrolling. Should I talk to her? Should I talk to her? Should I? You can't talk to any of them because you're not brave enough to go up in person. And even if you were.
Yeah. No, yeah, literally. I've had guys, multiple guys, not gonna name them, multiple guys at Southern, slide into my DMs. I'll pass them on the promenade, like I was talking about. Wait for like if they get rejected, they don't even like acknowledge me. And I'm like, really? You're gonna be that much of a baby about it? That's interesting.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that too.
Okay.
So, because something I think I've noticed is that girls sometimes after maybe like a date or two has happened and then kind of things just are moving in a different direction.
Sure.
A lot of girls seem to not be willing to make eye contact and have conversations afterward as well. And that doesn't excuse the guys at all.
Yeah.
I think, and this is more just my opinion, I do believe this though, guys need to take more responsibility just in general for making relationships work. And when I say relationships, I don't mean romantic relationships only. I mean just life in general. It's my responsibility to be the person who's not too scary to reinitiate contact and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, maybe you can shed some light if social media, phones or whatever play a role in this. It seems a lot of girls don't want to communicate. So it's hard to even get past that point.
That's valid and completely fair. And I think a lot of girls, truthfully, aren't capable at expressing their emotions very well. And I know that it's probably awkward to maybe have gone on a bad date with somebody and then still try and have a platonic relationship or just an acquaintanceship with them. But I think that a lot could just come from saying, hey, like I had fun, but I just don't think it's going to work out here. Like, but I hope we can continue to be friends, or if I'll see you around, like I'll give you a wave, that could go a lot further than just ghosting somebody. And I think a lot of times girls chicken out because they're just not mature enough, or they don't have the emotional ability to actually just communicate their feelings. And I think that's definitely something we as a gender could work on. So, yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't say that's something that only females as a gender could work on. And I'm sure it is something that women can work on. I'm sure everybody has so much room to keep maturing in their emotional intelligence and whatnot. And I don't want to focus this conversation as I move forward now so much on women, because I do see the problem coming from both sides.
Absolutely.
I agree. It is an issue. What I find interesting, though, is that a lot of people don't seem to even have the desire anymore to communicate better than you can communicate through messages that we just send back and forth on our phones. Like, tell me, I can talk about the guys afterward. You tell me about the ladies first.
Well,
do girls want to communicate better, or would they rather stay comfortable and miserable hiding in their room under their blanket on their phone?
I think that a lot of women in particular have kind of settled for this idea of, oh, if he asked me out over the phone, that's okay. And I think that us kind of not presenting ourselves or showing that we don't necessarily appreciate that from men might have created that. Or maybe there's just a lot of girls that don't care. You might honestly do a poll on that. Because I, for one, respect a guy much more if he definitely approaches me face to face. But I think there's just this level of settlement that has come from it. So, yeah. Hi.
That makes sense. Now, and this is a tangential question, but I'm just going to ask it while it's top of mind here. Sometimes I get the impression that girls are afraid of being approached in person. and that they're going to react really negatively and be really scared. And I don't mean that in terms of I'll get rejected, but I mean that in terms of they're legitimately going to be terrified and be like, I'm so glad he left. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know what he was going to say. That could just be me.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
I do see that. And I think it honestly kind of, what we were talking about, like with your mom traveling cross country without a phone, I think it can come up to feeling outnumbered and outpowered. If you have a male approach you and if you're in an area where you feel unsafe, I don't know about girls that might be tuning into this, but I'm like constantly thinking, okay, where's my exit? Where's my escape? If somebody approaches me, if I get kidnapped, how am I going to handle this situation? So being approached in public, especially like outside of Southern's campus, like if some guy came up to me in Walmart, immediately, like I would be like, unless they were around my age or with like, if I was with friends, that's different. So I think probably approaching a girl one-on-one, if you're one-on-one in a situation that might scream danger to her, is definitely scary. But I think, like, you know, being on Southern's campus or with a group of friends, that's a lot more of a comfortable environment.
Okay. And in my specific case, you know, without
tall,
saying
black. Without saying it.
Oh no, we weren't supposed to say that part.
God forbid.
Yeah. Now, Peyton, moving on, and we've touched on this already, but I want to zero in on this a little bit more. Phones limit the communication channels that we can use, right?
Yeah.
We're recording a podcast, but we're having a conversation here as well, right?
I think so.
Part of what I'm learning from listening to you talk is not just the words you're saying. It's your eye contact. It's when you lean forward, when you lean back, when you pause, hand gestures, all these other things, right?
Sure.
You miss all of that when you're sending text messages.
No, exactly.
And what's crazy to me, most kids don't even seem to think that's a big deal. They think the words are enough.
Exactly. You can't hear inflection. You can't hear tone. You can't, like, body language. That plays a huge role in face-to-face conversations. And obviously there's none of that. And I think that even FaceTime, you know.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up. Keep going.
Somebody that I'm very close to is in a long-distance relationship. And her boyfriend communicate via FaceTime. And, you know, that is the best situation possible. But I know it's still hard for them because without the lack of touch, with the lack of being able to see them and talk to them and actually like read their body language, you miss a lot of connection. And I think that, like you were saying, people tend to think that that's just okay when it's really not.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
And I literally have FaceTime doesn't equal in person on the outline here, so that's awesome. We're on the same page here. You know, because I think a lot of people do believe that, and a lot of people would say, okay, Peyton, I get it. Texting isn't the same. It's just words. But if you call on FaceTime, it's the same thing. No, it's not. I promise you, if you're paying attention, how close someone is standing to you when they talk, how quickly they walk up to you when they're speaking, and how much they move forward and move back as they're talking.
Even the pointing of their toes or, you know, their shoulder angling. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
That changes the meaning. Those things are all important. When you're holding a phone in your hand, or if it's sitting on a desk or whatever, you are not able to use all of those communication channels. And I think a lot of times, you know, we've talked about miscommunication, especially in terms of dating and whatnot, right? One of the biggest reasons we're miscommunicating is not because we're saying the wrong thing, but I believe it's because we are not able to fully express ourselves, because we only have words and whatever the selfie camera gets when we're recording snaps.
No, exactly.
And people are trying to get to know other people by what TikToks they send and what snaps they record. And I think Be Real is a cool app. I don't have it yet. I'm thinking about getting it.
It's honestly pretty cool because I noticed that I don't like spend a whole lot of time on it. It's just like a once a day thing, and then you're kind of done. So it's pretty cool. That's a tangent. But I think that there's a lot of people, I've seen even couples, you know, who live on Southern's campus, who maybe are in an argument or who are fighting or have an altercation, rather than meeting up and actually talking about it in person. So then the other person gets a mixed message. They might think, oh my word, like she's literally so mad at me, like she's gonna kill me, and she's not even that upset. But you can't hear tone, you can't hear inflection. There's just that lack of communication. And words are only one aspect of communication, because the rest comes from your body, your eye contact, everything you just said.
And you know what's crazy, Peyton, is you're making me think about this, and then we'll get into more detail off camera later on.
Okay.
But I used to have a roommate, and let's just say something happened. I was done wrong. And this roommate sent me a text message when I was in the house. With
him? In the house?
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's what we've come to. That's what phones are doing to us. Phones are just completely disconnecting us
Yeah.
from each other. We're not able to understand each other. We're not able to see what the other person is really even trying to say.
Yeah.
I think that's a massive problem. Now, this is slightly changing the subject, but we're still talking about text and communication.
Okay.
I want to know what you think about read receipts.
Are
Read receipts a good thing?
I don't have mine on, I can tell you that much. I think it kind of depends. When I'm like, if I'm close with somebody and if I get, left on read, it doesn't faze me. But I don't know. I don't know that I want anybody to see that much into my personal life. It feels like an invasion. If I read your text message and if I don't respond, there's kind of probably a reason for that, and I don't necessarily want you to know that I opened it, because delivered, I think, sends a different message than a read receipt.
I agree that it does. What's interesting too, I've been the type of person where I've usually kept my read receipts on. And it's because the first Apple device I got was an iPod Touch. And when you take it out of the box, it already has its read receipts on. So I just eventually realized, oh, I can see when other people read my messages. They can see when I've read theirs. I was like, that's cool. We'll just leave it on. And then obviously with time, as I connected with more and more people, I realized most people don't leave them on.
Yeah.
I completely understand that too. Now for me, I almost take a little bit of pride in keeping my read receipts on. And the reason why is because I think that it puts pressure on me to more promptly get back to people
That is fair.
after I open their messages.
I just checked because it didn't even register to me that you even had them on, but you do. And that is a good point. It does kind of create a sense of urgency, I guess. That's a good point.
And that's not something I would say prescriptively to anyone else.
Sure.
But for me, one of the ways I place a premium on good communication is that I want to text people back.
There you go.
And I've definitely been the person before where someone sends me a message and I'm like, yeah, we're going to hang out or whatever. And then they send the message on Monday, I read it on Friday or respond on Friday. And that's... I think that's impolite.
Sure.
And obviously I'm not accusing most people of having that problem. And I don't think that you have to have your read receipts on for you to text in a timely fashion. But I think for me personally, it helps. That's just why I like leaving them on.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting is that... Go ahead, actually.
Well, this is a little bit of a tangent off of read receipts. But kind of with you saying how it prompts you to respond quicker, I want to hear your take on... Have phones set us up in positions to be too readily available for others? Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
I think that's a good question. And I would say I think the answer to that question is definitely yes.
Yeah.
However, let me think about what I'm about to say here for a second.
Wow, I stumped Ben.
You stumped me. You stumped me. I think our phones have made us too readily available to other people. The expectation that I should be able to reach you at any point is higher now than it's ever been in the past. However, the reason why I still think having my read receipts on is a good thing and not something I would discourage other people from doing, even though it provides more information on, when I've opened the phone and whatnot, is just the simple fact that 99% of people are on their phones all the time.
Exactly.
So what having read receipts off can do is it leaves people more room to lie and say, oh, I didn't get your message. You got the message. You just didn't want to respond, and that's okay. But you should be honest about it.
That is true. I know I have been, in specific situations where maybe I'll get a longer text message and maybe it just is a little bit more packed with information, or maybe it's a deeper question or a deeper answer that I have to provide. And say it's a busy day. Say maybe it's 11 o'clock at night and I don't have the mental capacity, or maybe I'm taking some alone time. Maybe I'm sitting on my phone scrolling on Instagram, but I don't necessarily have the attention to put towards that person's text. So then it's almost like a sense of urgency where I'm like, oh man, okay, I have to respond so that this person doesn't get mad at me, but I have to almost take a step back and go, no, actually I can take time to myself. I'm allowed to separate my phone and this relationship with this person from my phone and my me time. Does that make sense?
That definitely makes sense. Okay. I'll tell you a funny story, Peyton. Okay. I was doing an internship in the summer of 2021, and I got a text message from somebody who didn't identify themselves, but I could tell it was work-related, somebody from the organization.
Sure.
And so, in trying to figure out exactly who this person was and how to professionally respond, I turn off my read receipts, which I don't usually do.
Okay.
So that I can go show the message to somebody else and be like, hey, who is this? what's a good way to respond?
Yeah.
All that great stuff, right?
Sure.
What's funny is I forgot to turn my read receipts back on for several months. And meanwhile, this whole time, obviously, I'm texting people, having conversations. In my mind, I'm always like, yeah, wow, I'm such a great communicator. I leave my read receipts on.
Yeah.
There was this one time, this one person, I had opened her message, but I hadn't responded to the message. And then I finally respond maybe a day later or something. I don't remember the timetable. But I apologized and I said, oh, I'm so sorry I left you unread this whole time. And she replied, she's like, well, the good thing is, we have our read receipts off, so it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
And I responded, and I got smart, and I was like, oh, don't think you can trick me into thinking I don't have my read receipts on.
Yeah.
Because hers are off.
Sure.
And then I went back and checked later on. I think I texted my sister, and I realized, oh, shoot, my read receipts are actually off.
Yeah.
And so I made a fool of myself doing that. Not that it matters. It's just a funny story.
That is a funny story.
So Peyton, one of the things we really like to do here at the Big Conversations podcast is we like to ask the question, do you have a problem?
Ooh, okay.
Do you have a question for me?
I actually do, Ben. Do you have a problem with Android users?
Absolutely.
You do?
I have a problem with Android users.
Wait, actually?
Yeah, see, have you ever had a time, and you use an iPhone, so I know we're on the
Right.
same
You know,
page
we're
here at least,
speaking
right?
freely here.
Yeah.
Per
you know,
usual.
when you want to send a message, when you want to send a group message, you can...
Oh, the group
messages are blue, right?
The group messages.
When you like
Yeah.
a message, the message is just liked.
Yeah.
When you want to do a group FaceTime call,
Right.
everybody just jumps on the call.
Exactly.
But then, you have that one Android friend, right? They
Yeah.
jump in the chat, all of a sudden, all the messages turn green, makes you want to throw up. You try to do the group FaceTime, they can't get in. But here's the worst thing. When they like the message
Oh,
and you
when
get
they
that
like it.
message, 423-233-3333, liked your message,
Yeah.
whatever it spells out. And see, here's the thing I don't understand, Peyton. The phones cost about the same.
True.
It's a free country.
Yeah.
Like why do people do that to themselves in 2020? Why would you choose to buy an Android when you can just buy an iPhone?
I really don't know. I've heard the argument for the camera quality, and the other day I did see a side-by-side comparison in class, actually. And I do have an iPhone, but the Android cameras recently are better. But that's about the only way that they're ahead. The graphics, the design, the layout, just the ease of using an iPhone, that's just so much better and so much more compatible with everyday life, I think, than Androids.
Yeah, and see, that's one of the biggest things for me. I know some Android people's blood is boiling right now.
Oh,
And
yeah,
they're
we're
going to
about
tell
to
me,
get so many calls.
Ben, do you realize I can run a business from my phone and do all this other stuff, and I can run all these apps? If you have enough money
Yeah.
to run a business,
Yeah.
you have enough money to buy a laptop and do your work on a laptop.
Yeah.
Don't try to work from
And
your phone. That's stupid.
convenient, how inconvenient is trying to run a business from a screen about this big? I just don't get it.
Yeah. Android users
Yeah.
couldn't make this stuff up. Peyton, this has been a really good conversation.
It
Is
has.
there anything else you want to throw out at our audience before we wrap this one up?
Guys, grow some balls. Ask her in person.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We're signing out for now. Remember, the word of the day is discoordinated.
Discoordinate.
Tell a friend, stay off social media, don't do anything I wouldn't do.